Hello, today is Wednesday, January 30th. This is the kubeadm office hours, part of Sync Cluster Lifecycle. We will start walking through the agenda for today. First up is Bartosz, I think one of the Intel folks. Discuss how kubeadm should deal with parameters specified in user-defined config. Do you want to talk that through, Ed?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So the current kubeadm behavior, like in case if config file is provided in the command line, so that some options are taken from the config and some are not, and it's kind of kubeadm just silently ignores them. That there are a number of issues. I specified actually 3, but there are more of those. And what I would like to discuss is how to change this. And in some of the issues, actually in one issue, Lubomir suggested 3 options. First one is to allow changes by the user, but show warnings if those changes deviates from the defaults. Another one is always override with the security defaults and document them. And the third one is always override, but also show a warning, like kubeadm applying security defaults. And I would add one more option is to actually exit with an error when user specifies something that is dangerous and kubeadm cannot apply it, but give user a possibility to force those parameters. So if they want to shoot themselves into the leg, we shouldn't actually well, we should allow them to do that. And so,
Ed,
yeah.
I wanted to ask if this is only about the swap on option and also about those security flags, right?
Well, I actually don't know. I know that it's well, there are issues with this, and I actually don't understand which options actually are taken from the config and which are not. So if somebody can explain it and explain what's the idea, because so far I see that it's well, I don't understand what is going on. So and users are confused as well.
Yeah, it is confusing. This has been a long-standing issue that we've kind of failed to address. And the problem is that the different issues are some of them are overlapping. I think the unified behavior should be, this one's closed. Let's take a look at each individual item here real quick. So this one,
I mean, we can still show a warning at least.
Showing a warning is fine. Yeah, a warning would be fine. And it does that today, right? If you do ignore pre-flight errors for given value, you should. I don't recall right now. I have to double check. You did. It used to show that you were overriding. So this one seems like it's a non-issue. Other than we should, if we're not showing something, we should show something.
I think the user was trying to use the kubelet configuration to set the swap. and we basically override this without saying a warning. A fail swap on to false.
So Lubomir, what's the default approach?
This one is really weird. So you're trying to override the unit file all the way through to kubeadm from kubeadm all the way to the unit file. Is that what you're saying?
So fail swap on, we basically pass this kubelet configuration to the kubelet. Like this is the kubelet configuration v1 beta 1, and we pass it in.
Yeah, I recall. That's the reason for my harsh answer down here. It's okay to do that for kubeadm to have this parameter override. It's not okay to pass that to the unit file. Like if you were to pass that setting to the unit file, it's not a cluster anymore because splitting doesn't mean anything, and the kubelet itself has no guarantees anymore. So that particular parameter wouldn't make any sense to do that. The kubelet does have an option to allow you to override that, which is fail on swap, right? But having kubeadm default this override through, I don't think would be in our best interest. This is a very development focused scenario. You should never see this in normal environments.
I guess it's a matter of when we are parsing the component configuration for the kubelet, we always override fail swap on to true, no matter what the user is doing. And I guess Ed is proposing here, or I guess it's my proposal, to show a warning that, hey, if you want to set fail swap on, it's not going to work. We override this value for you.
I think allowing kubeadm to deploy on a test environment, because being honest, this is actually how I test. I actually ignore swap, even though I have, and I disable it in the unit file. But I think from a user perspective, because I'm running it on a desktop for a lot of times in my test environment, but allowing this for a user is dangerous because the cluster isn't even conformant anymore, right? So I get this flow. I think having this just have a warning is a legitimate thing. That's one scenario, but I don't think we should pass this through and with like warning scenarios all the way to the unit file. I'll pause there and see what other people think.
Yeah, this seems like it's a minor user improvement, a minor user experience improvement that has a perfectly good workaround with ignore preflight errors.
Do we know all the options that we override? So should we do it? It's just an example issue. So the issue is that it's the main issue, as I understand it, that it's confusing because user puts something into the configuration file and expects that those options will be applied, but they are not. So it's not just about these options; it's about the approach, I would say.
That's a better question. I think we would have to do a help scenario for every single command line and walk through it to make sure it makes sense. But this is one option. Let's take a look at one of the other issues you referenced. This one was 1254. This is 1251.
Another field, I think, in the kubelet config that we override without a warning is the one about the certificate rotation. It is required for us, but we override it without a warning.
So there are only two options, right? So and this bug is actually about this certificate, right? Yes, rotate certificate.
So I really think we'd have to actually walk through it on a case-by-case basis, which is not going to be fun, but probably would be good. Did you perhaps a better venue for this particular one, because you're not going to get a consistent answer for some of these things, would be to set up a separate meeting where we can actually walk through in detail some of the configuration options and write down inside of the help menu for given things what the behavior should be? Did you
Yeah.
plan on working on it this cycle, Ed?
I don't know. I can work on it. So if it's needed, but I was confused, like, so, and I would like to see like some kind of explanation and actually the list of options. If there are only two, that's not a problem at all. So we will fix or not fix it or just add warnings. But if there are many, I don't actually know how to find them.
Just a second. Rafael is posting a link about these. Exactly. Yeah, these are the security options. Please check the link in chat. These are the security options we override no matter what options the user already provided in the component config that he feeds to init.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we don't show a warning that we override these fields.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I can actually look at it. I can go through this list, and if there are no warnings, I can add. So that's not a big deal.
There's different.
May I add something? If I remember well, also in the API server, we are overriding user settings for security reasons.
So we should definitely have like at least documentation about what options exist, what options we allow overriding for to feed through, and what options we just warn.
I think that we shouldn't document them because we have to maintain this extra document that changes all the time. We might decide to add more flags to the list and stuff like that. Instead, if we have a mechanic to warn about the override of these specific fields, the user is going to always see this in the command prompt in the terminal and know that they are like adding options that we don't tolerate.
Yeah, the documentation could get a little weird too because we would be documenting kubelet configuration and
Yes.
not kubeadm configuration.
I meant in the command line overrides inside of the optional arguments that you specify for some of these. Some of the other overrides and configuration would be different. So like the command line here would be it'd be the document of when you do the help menu option for pre-flight errors, and that would give you the options of what exist inside of the code, right? So I wouldn't do it as a separate doc. It'd be in code documentation is what I was thinking.
So the swap, the one about swap is kind of in middle ground because we have a pre-flight check for that. And I mean, we already have a warning about swap that it should be disabled. But the security flags, we don't have anything about them. They are just silently overwritten.
Why don't we have like, maybe we should start with like an enumeration of the different options and the behavior that exists and the behavior that we want. Because the problem is we have so many flags and options and config knobs that I'm even confused thinking about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And then +1 on sending warnings out when we override something that a user tries to set.
So maybe a good path forwards here would be like, one, create a little doc. These are the different options, and here are the different behavior routes that we see. I know you did that partially in the doc, but like try to get it a little more exhaustive. And then outline like, here's the behavior that we would want in the ideal case for the different enumerated options, right?
This can be part of the document about the kubeadm/kubelet integration under setup. Yeah.
It could be, but I think for internally for right now within the sub-project, we could use that doc to help converse about like these set of knobs should behave this way. These set of knobs should not behave this way.
But again, we have to basically maintain a list of knobs that are in the kubelet configuration. I mean, it is stable. It is in beta, but we still have to maintain the list in a document somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just a starting point, and then we can converse next week about the behavior. Because right now you have two sets, and you have at least two sets, if not more. And I can't give you a solid answer without knowing the state space of the different ones, because some of the options, the behavior will be different than what we expect. But like you can't have the same policy across all of them.
Yes. So if somebody wants to help here, we need to collect the list of all the options that we override silently. And from there we can write docs.
Yeah, I can do it, but I might need your help. Like, I mean, like, I need to understand how to find them.
I also don't know how to find them. You just have to look at the code.
Okay.
That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will. I know some of them. I will pass you the link of to the code where they are.
Okay. Okay, guys. I will ask you if I'm lost with this, but yeah, I can do it.
So why don't we follow up on this topic next week? Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, makes sense.
So we create an issue for this, an umbrella, like an umbrella issue, and we can sync there, or
Yes, please log an issue about the obtaining the list. We can converse there. So the next item, should I go with the next item?
Yeah, I'm typing, so go ahead.
So this is a hairy one, and it wasted our weekend of me, Fabrizio, and Rafael. We opened a can of worms, and it's about kubeadm join having basically an unnamed argument, and that this particular argument is the endpoint you pass for the API server or the master. It's also can be the control plane endpoint, but we don't handle this as a flag. It's just an unnamed argument, and we are entering the space of Cobra magic here. But we basically, this forced us to do some gymnastics in the phase runner that I don't really like. And also you can look at my link that is called "Here is how it's handled currently." We basically check if the number of arguments is more than one, and we do some sanity if this is basically a discoverable IP later. But I think we are doing things wrong here, and I think this should be a regular FWAC code endpoint. But the problem here is that we have to break GA. And the way to break GA here is to deprecate the unnamed argument and introduce the FWAC in parallel and show a warning where applicable. The deprecation policy for this is 12 months of 2 releases. And my vote is to get rid of this unnamed FWAC. Unnamed argument, sorry.
Okay. Can I give my 2 cents on this? So I think that many issues are conflicting here. The piece of code Lubomir is showing was there since time, and it was introduced when we moved from one bootstrap token from many possible discovery link to one only. It was part of our roster change in last cycle. So I will put this out of the way, and it is a hack that will go away when V1 beta 1 go away. So it is a temporary. The second problem regards to Cobra, not to the phase runner. It's not specific to the phase runner, but it regards to Cobra. And it happens when you have a command that use args and as subcommand. And the problem exists when the domain of values for your args overlap with the name of your subcommand. In this case, in the case of join, we are unfortunate because the domain of value of the args, which is a host name, can overlap with the name of subcommand. So if we are unfortunate if a user joins towards an host name which is similar to phase or overlap to phase. This is the tricky part, but it is part of the mechanic of Cobra. That's it. I think that we can move on for now. What we achieved is to being able to move on in the phases implementation, but still there is some problem. I don't think it is a big problem or a blocking problem. It is only weird. It is a problem of the arg domain overlaps with the name of subcommand.
So from my point of view, I see wider problems with the current design, but I mean, maybe that's something that maybe it's something that is artificial, the examples that I'm going to say. But if you have, for example, one phase, the top level phase that takes two unnamed arguments, and then you have two subphases of this one. And the first subphase is using the first argument, and the second subphase is using the second one. Then the open question is, how do we pass these arguments to the subphases? Do we need to pass both arguments to both subphases, even though if only one of them is going to use one of those arguments, like the first subphase is going to use the first argument, and the second subphase is only going to use the second one? Or should we pass? I mean, this is the open question that I have. It's not really that tight to Cobra, but how we are going to pass this information along?
Let's take a step back here for a second. Like, what is the exact use case of a join phase where the condition is that you're hitting? Because we went through this in the init phases where like we had to have a hierarchical model for how the parameters flowed through. So what exact join phase is the one that's having the issue, and what's the parameter incantation that you have the problem, or that folks are seeing as the problem?
First,
like an exact use case.
I will move out of the table the case that we were discussing now, because for now we have only a case where we have only one argument. So I will, the combination of args, I will move out of the table. And the case is, kubeadm join as an argument which is the address of the master, okay? This argument is needed by all the first set of phases which are prefied. I'm not sure prefied, but for sure no, prefied need it because it does TLS bootstrap, and also and I don't know if some other phases need it.
Yes.
So the common pattern we had before was that if you had a parameter that was common across multiple phases, is that you would so it'd be join phases foo, and then you would have kubeadm join. I don't remember if it was here or here, but you'd have one override, and they would apply to all phases. You couldn't specialize per phase. You could only do custom, because we had this long conversation for BTL when we did init phases, right?
Yes, and the current state is that all the flags applies only to the top level command and to the lift command. It doesn't apply to the intermediate command. So if you have phase control plane, you don't have phases in the control plane, but you have to use control plane all. So only the leaf command are operative, let me say, can do action. All the intermediate command are only container.
So I think I'm missing the issue here, because it seems like this is a rehash of the exact conversation we had when we first did init phases.
The only problem here, team, is that okay, you can I think that we agree that that flags and args should apply both to the parent phase and to the child phases. Okay.
Yes, provided they're common. They
provide, okay.
Yeah.
We agree that we would like to specialize phases in order to get the phases accept only what is relevant for them.
Yes.
Okay. This is already implemented for flags, but not yet implemented for args. But it is not a problem we can do later. It's not blocking now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Then we have another problem that is that the arg accepted by join is a value domain that overlaps with the subcommand. I give you an example. You can do kubeadm join mymaster.com. Okay, because mymaster.com is a valid host name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you can do this is a really weird case, but you can do kubeadm join phases, and Cobra get confused because phases it interpreted phases as the subcommand. But what are you if you're meaning a host name?
I see what you're saying.
Okay, okay, this is a corner case. The bad side of this is that before we had something that somehow helped the user if they mistyped. If you write phase E with 2E, before command help give you some help. Now, because the value domain between the name of phases and the host name overlap, we are losing this user help.
So I currently see the problem as, because we have the legacy mechanics for join, and we want to modify the behavior of join to have similar phases semantics, the argument overlap causes an issue. Is that correct? Is that is that a fair supposition of like summary of the?
Yes, and the two sides of this issue is that you cannot use phase as a host name, and so, you don't get suggestion if you mistype.
So there's a couple options instead of trying to like circle around the modification for join. Like we can, when in doubt, we could have another layer of indirection where we could say current join is entering into a deprecation cycle, and then we call it underscore join, or we call it something else that we promote over time, and we go through the deprecation loop, right? That is not ideal, but it allows us to restructure the code to get out of this current path. Or if there's some clever jiggery in how we want to do the phase runner and the arg passing, that's another option, but I'd have to take a look at the details. I understand the problem now, I think.
Just another thing from my side. Yeah, before my example was very conflated. I mean, in this example, it also applies because if you want to run kubeadm join with the location of the master, this argument, unnamed argument, is going to be passed because of the data initializer to all these subphases in an automated way. But the problem comes right now today when I want to call kubeadm join phase with subphases directly. I have to pass this argument to all of them or only to some of them. We don't really know right now. We will have to check the source code in order to document this. To which subphases do you really need to pass the arg? And my concern regarding the UX is that we don't have a way to validate this properly. If you pass 3 arguments, it's going to work. Because and you're going to just ignore the second and the third. You're going to use the first one. This is something that can be also fixed on the data initializer, but I was wondering if there was some way, and this can be for the future, so one subphase is able to say, I expect 2 maximum arguments, or I expect 1 exact argument, something like this. So we have easier way to tell the user how many arguments they need, or this subphase exactly needs.
Yeah, so why do we do this? Why don't we open an issue with the different phases for kubeadm join and the current problem, the current behavior. This is exactly what we did when we promoted init phases. And then we wrote down all the different command line arguments as well as the input flag overrides. And then it should percolate. It should make more sense, because right now we're talking so abstractly. I don't remember what all the details of the phases are for join. But that way we'll have an enumeration of what's there, log it in the issue, and log the exact use case scenario of the failure. And I can loop back on that. We can have a discussion next week on this particular topic.
So
I agree. This is why I pushed to unblock the development phases and wrote a new line in the tracking issues that is the final refinement on args UX, like we did with flags in last cycle.
Yeah.
So we can already use the existing tracking issue because we have the list of phases there, and in the list of phases we can add like a special note that this phase, like I'm sure the bootstrap one needs the arg for sure. This particular phase needs this argument that we have to pass to it.
Yeah. Could you put the link to the tracking issue in here for
just a second.
my sanity?
I think that a new issue will be better, just to don't mix up the discussion about the priority with this specific topic.
Okay, I'm going to create a new issue. So I didn't get a direct response for my question here. Should we move this to a flag in the future?
I can't state that unequivocally yet. I think I need to see what's there and what's the override.
Okay.
I don't, because there's a couple ways we could hash this problem. It's a question of figuring out what, just like with the other problem, enumerate the state space, enumerate the options, and then we'll pick from the least bad of the options. That's usually the way we go, right? What's the entire state space of the world? Then how could we approach it, and then pick the least bad one is usually the modus operandi.
Yeah, I think that's, we should have done this a long time ago. I completely missed this problem. Yeah. They should have been fixed for GA, for sure. Okay, I'm writing the issue in 5 minutes.
All right. Thanks, Loomer. Appreciate it.
I think the next one is also from me, or was it? Oh yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
So Dims created a PR to bump Docker in kubeadm to 18.09, and we merged that PR, and there was another PR that fixes problems in the original PR by Dims. So we are now kind of arbitrarily bumping Docker. We don't have end-to-end tests for that. We can add it. We can add end-to-end testing Kubernetes anywhere. Currently, Ben is refusing to bump kind to 18.09 because he is claiming that this is going to break other kubeadm. I'm saying that it's not going to break if you provide ignore preflight errors all. Kind is already doing that anyway. Yeah, we don't. We also have to bump test infra, the images in test infra, and release. So should we proceed with this, the change of the world to default to 18.09?
I think we should. What's the current support matrix for the current one that we have, 1806? When does it end of life?
I honestly do not know. We just arbitrarily bump versions because if somebody is claiming, hey, the next Docker version is good, we just decide and bump it without any real backup.
So we could still bump the version without CI signal, but not make it the default check, right? We've done that before actually, because people have requested it, where the default CI signal is still running at 1806 or an older version. In fact, we did this for a very long time, and I think it was like 1.13 was the default version forever. But we bumped the internal checks to allow newer versions, because users wanted to use them, and as reports were filed, we just addressed some of those issues. And most of the people on the sub project did light verification testing across their environments, and if nothing exploded terribly, we just made sure that we just went forwards. That's been a common pattern. I don't necessarily think it's a good one. I kind of wish we could just have a stable CRI. So what do folks think there? I think it's okay if we have initial passing, we don't fail on it, but we still keep the defaults so long as the life cycle for support of that is within reason.
These are just for the pre-flight checks, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I like keeping the default with the supported version.
So basically now these PRs that we are doing, they are simply adding support for this. It's not the minimum supported Docker version. We are basically adding the version into the unit test we perform. Like me and Czech are talking about the unit test the other day, these particular ones, the system ones. So if you have Docker, the new Docker now, it's not going to fail for you because we have this new version into the list of supported versions. But we can still keep, we can still keep the default.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
That unit test is super weird though, because that unit test tests the system that you're running the unit tests on. And that's
yes,
weird.
Yeah. They always fail for me, all of them.
It just doesn't seem like a useful test.
Well, these tests are not written by us, by the way. They originated in the test folder, and we just decided that we are the only consumer of them, and we copy-pasted them into the kubeadm folder, and now we maintain them.
We can always do more sane things. We can always refactor the tests. Like, we don't need to maintain craziness if we see debt. Like, we're not underneath the drumbeat of having to get to GA anymore. So if we see technical debt, we can absolutely just clean it up, right? I do think, does anyone know what the life cycle of 1806 currently is? Like, how long we have?
I mean, I can Google it right now.
It's a 5-year support cycle, I believe.
I missed that, Nadir. What was it?
It's 5 years.
Oh gosh, yeah, we're fine. add the support. Don't document it for the time being until we actually update kind, or you could say provisional in the document if you wanted to.
I mean, there's not there isn't anything to change really. It's because it's single binaries, system D standardization, so it's pretty cosmetic in a sense.
I think we're fine. Lubomir, what do you think?
So we're keeping the default to 0.6. We now support 0.9, and we are basically don't have to default.
We say we provisionally support, just like we provisionally support container D and cryo, right?
Yes. So this is mostly for Rusty because he promised to update the installation page. I guess Rusty, you can just add that we support 0.9 as well now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments, complaint, concerns on that one? All right. Next up is the green light for certificates copy for join control plane. Help wanted. Maurizio.
Yes, so today I started to write the tracking issue where I put together, if you want to click to the link there, where I put together the activity that we have to do for the certificate copy workflow and what was already done, and also a set of other HA possible improvement. Some of them are already done for the joy control plane and so on. So there is we are in a good shape. Iago already volunteered for starting with the certificate copy workflow, but there are room for many other improvements. So it is a PSA. I didn't add too many detail in this tricky issue because to keep it simple, just ping me and I will point you to all the details. And yeah, there is something that we should decide. I think we should agree upon at the beginning before starting, which are the change to the config for the encryption key. And basically the context here is that we want to allow the user to use to set the encryption key in the config for the init workflow, so the encryption key doesn't get logged or in the history or whatever. And same applies for the join workflow, where we want the user to use the join config in order to specify the encryption key for downloading certs. So we need to change the config, and I think that is important that we agree where this change should go before acting in order to not have too many recycles on the PR.
So I'm a little confused by the statement of having config for the encryption key.
Okay, I try to explain.
Because you wouldn't actually store it in config, right? You shouldn't store it in config.
No, the problem is the same that you have in config. At least this was what written in the cap. So the problem that we have with the secrets in general is that user don't want to pass those secrets via CLI, because CLI gets logged in the history or in the logs of your automation, whatever. So what we did for the token is that to allow the token to be passed with the config instead of with the CLI. The same I proposed in the cap for the encryption key.
Cannot we use an environment variable for that? So they decide how they feel that environment variable, like reading a file or...
the user has two options for the encryption key. He can let kubeadmin generate the encryption key, and then kubeadmin will print the generated encryption key in the init output. But this is visible, and this will be logged. Or, as alternative, the user can generate the encryption key by its own with another command that we have to define. Then pass the predefined encryption key to the init using a config file. The encryption key will not store it in the cluster. It's just a way to give an input to init.
Yep.
And then the user can use the config to pass the encryption key to join.
I get you. I totally agree. I think what was, I think my brain segfaulted on the term config is so overloaded because there can be, you're going to pass in a configuration file, but that configuration file is totally separate from all the standard config apparatus.
Yes, this field will go in the init configuration that is not stored in the cluster.
Yes. Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. I just,
No problem. No problem.
Yeah.
So, being this, first of all, this is an addition to our config. I think that we have to add this only to v1 beta 1 and to internal. And it is an addition. It does not require to bump a new config version. Is that right?
You should bump a version if you add parameters. Unless it's totally omit empty. Well, no, you should bump the version.
Yes, and the API server and API machinery folks are not doing that, and that they are breaking the rules technically.
Well, when they're adding fields to known, yeah. I mean, the API server folks, but the problem is like V1 promotion, right? Like they add fields to something that's V1. We should talk with Jordan real quick on this one. It might be possible to do straight addition in a reasonable way. The problem is, does it break old versions if it exists? Right? I think that's the kicker, right? The kicker is if you have this parameter specified, which is a file, it's basically a location. Does that parameter existence on older versions break? If so, you need a new version.
So Jordan,
no, it doesn't break because we are not strictly validating the config.
So if we're not doing strict validation, then we should be okay.
we are actually already doing it because we print warnings for that. And also Jordan participated in the discussion that I'm talking about where somebody added a field user in the API machinery channel complained and asked Jordan if they should bump V1 to something else. And Jordan said that they technically should do it. They should bump.
So why don't we table this particular part of the discussion? I think everything else is awesome, like the breakdown of all the work items. The logistics of how we store some of this in config, why don't we deal with that asynchronously?
I open 1374 for discussing those details. It is linked in up.
Okay. Lumir, you talk too much.
I wanted to Fabrizio, I wanted to ask, because I was typing something else in the meantime, are we planning to add the key as a field visible in the config, such as that the user can see it if they open the config, or is it only for internal use?
No, the problem is that, okay, I'm a user. I want to give, I don't want that kubeadm generates a random key for me, because I want to use a key that for instance, I'm using an automation, and I prefer to generate my own key and then reuse it in the join. Okay, so I generate the key out of band using a command like kubeadm token generate. I think that we need kubeadm key generate. This will print out a key. Then the user have to keep this key and pass it to the init. Okay, and the way for doing this is to use a field in the config file, in the init configuration object of the config file. kubeadm init will consume this field, but don't store this field in the cluster.
The question that I have here, could we have this encryption key in the internal config, probably also optionally in the v1 beta 1, but if there is an environment variable that we document with this content, we initialize the internal one with this environment variable? So there is yet another way to provide this key?
It's a little weird. It's not standard, right? Like if I'm doing key passing, the most common thing would be to specify a path to a file, right? And the key would be stored in the file. That's if we're being as secure as possible, that would be the default way.
So I want to break here because this is a security problem we are discussing here. You cannot store the key in the cluster in any type of config, basically. That's it.
No, it wouldn't be stored on cluster. What Fabrizio is saying is that init config is not stored on cluster. There's init config and cluster config. What he's saying is the localized init config would be passed in, and it would have that localized parameter. It would never be visible via command line. It would only be visible to administrators who can do init.
And Lubomir, this is described in the cap, and we already get the sig out green light.
Yeah. We technically do the same for the bootstrap token, correct?
Exactly.
Yes. But the problem with this key is that, so our plan was to generate a random one and make it expire. If we keep the same key in the config, what is the purpose of the expiry?
The expiring is for the secrets, not necessarily for the key. How, like we can defaultly do it as a token that we generate that auto expires, but the key or the secrets will auto expire based upon the token that we generate. If a person uses their own key, it's their business, right? We won't auto expire that secret because the secret won't have an owner ref, right?
So I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we should still expire the secret. Otherwise, we end up with a long-running kind of administrative token, which is what we were trying to avoid.
We could do that too. There's nothing that prevents us to do the default 24-hour. Your secrets will auto. This secret will self-destruct at 24 hours.
My idea was to expire the.
Sorry, guys, I didn't get the question from Jason.
Well, I was just saying that if a user provides an encryption key, we should still auto expire the secret. Otherwise, we go back to having the security issue of having admin credentials that are persisted on the cluster.
I agree. The secret expires no matter if we are generating a key or the user is passing his own key.
Yeah, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there. Talking about the user key.
I think we should expire the secret in 1 hour. That was my proposal in the KIP. I don't know what others think about it.
No opinions. Sorry, team. For the change to the config, we table a discussion on this issue. Okay.
Yes, this particular discussion of the field ad. Just the question of whether or not we need to rev. I would probably err on the side of caution and rev, but I was hoping that we would batch up revisions.
Okay. Bumping a new version of the config now is, I think that is not feasible. We have 1 month of work, or no? When it is the end, the code freeze.
1 second, I'll get you an answer.
7th of March or something like this.
Yep. 7th of March is technically the code freeze. It's a little weird because usually they call out code slush and code freeze.
To my understanding, we are not. I'm sorry, I'm confusing code. The other term we were using anyway.
I think they killed the idea of code slush with this release.
Yeah, I think code slush is gone as well. Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
One of the phases is gone from the release cycle.
Yes, so if we need to punt on that, I don't think it's the end of the world for storing a user-generated token. And we'd still be able to get by, but we could batch for this cycle too. Why don't we take that particular issue asynchronous, and let's talk with Jordan about API promotion and field edition.
I agree. Plan B is to implement only the automatically generated token, but this will be difficult to use from automated tools.
Well, it's already difficult. We're lowering baby steps.
Yes, one.
Right today, right now, it's more difficult than it will be in the next steps. Are there any other last issues that we currently have?
Our CI signal was red pretty much for the past 5 days because of test infra problems. And
I saw that.
something else, Tim. We temporarily disabled. We have a pre-submit for kubeadm that is currently disabled. It has disabled logging at least. It doesn't report. And we temporarily disabled that to be able to perform a gymnastic in test infra related to run after success. That's basically a field in their config for prowl. And I'm yet to see today. I didn't have the time to verify if this test continues to run. I just wanted to let you know that we are fiddling with the pre-submit kubeadm. And my idea there is that we should probably remove it completely and move to kind.
Yes, I would agree.
One problem with that is that we don't Kubernetes Anywhere is handy because it tests artifacts. It pulls them from a GCS bucket, and with kind we are not doing any of that. We're just building stuff ourselves.
Well, I was hoping we'd get to the artifact generation bit today, but that's a bit unfortunate. But you'll get it in periodics though, right? Even if it's on submit or pre-submit, like you'll get it on periodics, the artifact generation bit.
Yes, because they follow a different process with the Bazel build. They acquire like CI cross artifacts. They don't depend on the PR that just built, like the artifacts we built from a PR in a pre-submit. So yeah, it's much easier there. I also try to explain to the SIG testing folks that we watch the periodics like predominantly.
Yes, a vast majority of us. I'm fine with kind doing whatever it is, so as long as it catches the kubeadm bugs before they get in. Like last cycle, there was a change that we had to revert for. Was it last cycle or the cycle before? I don't remember, because it was not on the PR blocking jobs. So thanks for the update. I'm with you. I agree with you. I don't know what else. Is there anything else you want me to to follow up on with regards to that?
No, I just have to move forward with adding the kind jobs to our dashboard,
Mhm.
so that we have tests for the different branches using kind. But it's kind of early in the cycle yet. I'm going to add it hopefully by the end.
Okay, sounds good. Right. We've run over time, so I think we hit it. I did want to talk about artifacts, but maybe we can do that asynchronously. Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.